Want to expand the reach of your content? Start a podcast. Feature industry experts on your show and leverage the influence and reach of your guests to grow your brand. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show. Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media and one of the co-hosts of this show. And I'm really excited to dive into this solo episode on our Behind the Curtain series of this show. And in today's episode, we are going to be talking about how we at Sweetfish Media recently revamped and developed our new core values. Now, it sounds kind of weird to change your core values. So I want to tell you why we went through the process of changing those core values. But before I get into that, I'll first give a shout out to the book called The Advantage by Patrick Lencioni. I read this book, was deeply moved by a lot of the concepts in this book. So if you are an avid reader or if you are just wanting to take your leadership to the next level, I would highly, highly recommend checking out The Advantage by Patrick Lencioni. A lot of what I'm going to be talking about in this episode comes directly from that book. So I will dive in by first talking about why we shifted around our values. And the core reason was I couldn't even remember all of the values that we had established. We used to have 7 core values. And I remember when I first came up with them, being very excited about them, but they did what most values do. They sat on a blog post on our site and our team had no clue what they were. I never talked about them. And values are absolutely no good if they just sit in a blog post or if they are just words on walls. And so after reading The Advantage, I realized that I needed to tighten up our values and go from 7 values down to 3 values, because I knew if we could get it down to 3 values, everyone in the organization would have the ability to remember them and ultimately operate out of those values. And so that's why we decided to revamp our values. I wanted to get it down to where we only had 3 of them so that they were more memorable and much easier to operate from because people could actually know what they were and remember them. And so we have done a lot of things to operationalize our values. We do a thing called the Values Champion of the Month, where every month we put out a Google survey. And people, it's really a nominations survey where you can go in and put which one of the 3 values you saw someone demonstrate, and then write their name in there, and then the story of what they did to demonstrate that value. And then at the end of the month, we go through and pick as a leadership team who we think the values champion should be. We give them a little gift card, and then we celebrate them in Slack and via email because we want to reiterate the importance of these values on a regular basis. And so by doing the monthly values champion, it is a systematic process that we can follow to make sure that we're celebrating the people that are living out our values. So that's one thing that we do. Obviously, there are a lot of things that you can do to operationalize values, but that has been really helpful for us. So now that you know why we decided to revamp our values and a little bit of how we operationalize our values to make sure that values stay top of mind, I want to spend the rest of this episode talking about the process that we went through as a leadership team to determine what our new values were going to be. This came straight from The Advantage. And there are 3 simple questions that we asked as a leadership team. The first question was, what are the characteristics of our all-star employees, the folks that are already on our team? What are the things that make those folks all-stars? So we asked that question, and I was so proud to just hear how long that part of the conversation went on. As a leadership team, we kept talking about different people on our team, what made them incredible. And we just made some notes. Okay, we really love that Lily is this way, or that Alicia is this way, or that Ryan does this. And as we jotted those down, that was a good baseline for what we wanted our values to ultimately become. And so then the next question we asked ourselves, this, and I love the way that Lencioni phrases this. He says, what are the characteristics of employees that would better serve the organization by no longer being a part of it? I love that phrasing. Basically, what are the characteristics of the folks that you don't want on your team, or that are not great team members? And so we very fortunately had a much shorter conversation about this, because I think we've done an exceptional job, thanks to Brittany on our team, of bringing on just amazing talent. And so we didn't have a lot of folks on the team that had characteristics that we don't love. And so, but this was still a helpful exercise, because when you know what you don't want, it's easier to clarify what you do want your values to be. And so we actually landed on our third core value as a result of identifying characteristics that we do not want or no longer want in our organization. And so the third thing that we asked ourselves was, what are the characteristics that we as a leadership team embody? Lencioni told a story in the book about one particular leadership team that he was working with, and they wanted kindness to be one of their core values. But he challenged them and pushed back and said, not that all of you aren't nice people, but nobody on this leadership team really embodies kindness. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. They obviously had a lot of other great characteristics, but kindness, he said, doesn't seep out of you. And if the value that you are wanting to define for your entire organization does not come and flow naturally out of the people on the leadership team, it's going to be really hard to get everyone else on the team aligned to that value. So we really looked and said, are the core values that we are establishing, are these characteristics that flow naturally out of us as a leadership team? So those were the three questions that we asked ourselves. What are the characteristics of our all-star employees that we want to replicate? What are the characteristics of employees that would better serve the organization by no longer being on the team? And do we as a leadership team embody the characteristics of these values? So we ended up coming up with a list of 3 core values. And those values are: we love people well, we never stop learning, and we own the result. And I could go on and elaborate on those, but for the purpose of this episode, I wanted to more focus on the process that we went through to land on those 3 core values. And so there's one other kind of caveat to this that was really helpful for me as I was working with our leadership team to come up with these values. And that's what Lencioni calls permission to play values and aspirational values. By having an understanding of what permission to play and what aspirational values are, it helps you hone in on what your actual core values are. And so the way he describes permission to play values are, they're typically characteristics that are not at all differentiators: hardworking, honest, things that you would typically see that companies claim to be their core values. But really, if those things aren't present in your organization, then you don't even have permission to play here. These are no-brainer, kind of obvious characteristics that we want all of our employees to have, but they do not distinguish or separate us as a brand from our competition. And him articulating it in that way and calling these values permission to play, because obviously we all want to be honest. We all want to be trustworthy. We all want to be hardworking. All of these kind of vague characteristics that a lot of companies claim to be values, they are good things. And we don't not want those to be a part of our organization. But we don't want them to be our core values because they don't really reflect the personality of the organization or the differentiators of the organization. And instead, they're kind of blasé and honestly a little bit boring. So he calls these values permission to play values. The other type of values that he talks about are aspirational values. These are values that you would love to have as a part of your culture. But if you're really honest with yourself, you're not quite there yet. You aspire to be able to operate in those values, but you are not currently operating there. And he suggests that you should only have as your core values, going back to that third question that we asked when we were developing our values, are these values something that we as a leadership team naturally live out? And so if there's a particular value that you say, man, that would be incredible if our team, if our leadership team, if all of our employees operated out of that value, that would be phenomenal. We're not quite there yet. Put some measures in place, create some systems, some process around making sure that you can operationalize that aspirational value. And if over time that you can embed that into your culture, then eventually it can be a core value. But calling a spade, calling it what it is and saying, hey, this is actually an aspirational value for us. It's not quite core yet, will help you really fine tune and hone in on what your true core values are. And once you have clarity on those core values, it just makes everything a whole lot easier. Your communication gets a whole lot easier. The way the processes and systems that you create as an organization, knowing that you want all of your systems, all your processes to align to your core values, that gets easier. The way you hire, what you look for in new hires gets so much easier when you have clarity around your core values. I've been talking to a couple new employees actually this morning, and it was so refreshing to get to talk to these new employees and just kind of welcome them to the team. And as part of those welcome calls, I talk about our core values. And both of the women that I talked to this morning said, oh yeah, when Brittany was talking to me about these core values during the hiring process, and I really resonated with, the fact that we love people well, or I really resonated with, the fact that we own the result. And that to me, what that said to me was by Brittany integrating, by us as an organization having clarity on what our core values are, Brittany can now make hiring decisions, the folks that we're bringing into the team, based on what these values are. And so when you bring people on that are already aligned with you, everything gets easier. These people already operate the way we operate, so we don't have to teach them our core values. They already live out our core values. So it's all that to say, I can't speak highly enough or I can't advocate long enough for getting clear on your core values. I hope this was helpful to you. Would love to connect with you on LinkedIn, James Carbary, Carbary. And as always, thank you so much for listening. Your attention means the world to me. Love you guys a ton.
Digital marketing agencies have a tough job. You have to stay on top of the latest marketing strategies for your clients and your agency. What if there was a way you could address both at the same time? Imagine your agency putting out content with greater quality and quantity. Envision bringing your clients a turnkey solution for one of B2B marketing's fastest growing media strategies, podcasting. All those clients asking for your help with their account-based marketing efforts? Picture being the first to bring them the idea of content-based networking, showing them the proven strategy for breaking into their most coveted accounts. Here's the concept. Sweetfish Media is looking to work with a limited number of innovative agencies interested in a new partnership model. We produce a podcast for your agency. You introduce the power of podcasting and Sweetfish services to your clients. Everybody wins. Learn more at sweetfishpartners.com.